seriously injuring both officers.
A female officer just behind the two men escaped injury. This road construction worker said he heard shots and saw the officers on the ground. But since there were many people at the time, he said he important areas. Authorities sealed off parts of Mongkok, including Waterloo Road and Peace Avenue, as well as nearby Shantung and Yinpo Feng streets, where the suspects were
items, whoever is on it.
Amy.
Thank you, Louise. Now, Yangshuo is another must-see spot besides from Guilin. Now, here you can also see hills of different shapes, but without the hustle and bustle of Guilin. This scenic beauty is also printed on the 20 yuan note. Now, below those hills runs Lijiang, the river that connects Guilin and here. Now, the water seems quite clear right now, but not so some 20 years ago, when industries on both sides of the river heavily polluted its water.
Described by Chinese as the most beautiful spot in the world, Guilin is renowned both locally and overseas. But few visitors would know that this place was heavily polluted in the 80s.
当时呢，我们邓小平同志到桂林漓江来就说了，你还我美好河山，功不抵过，漓江的发展功不抵过。
1.6 million people joined sightseeing tours along the Lijiang, the river connecting Guilin with another famous sport, Yangshuo. To control water pollution, all food must be washed before being brought on board, so the dirty water doesn't go into the river.
Right now, trees are everywhere on both sides of the Lijiang, but some 10 years ago, trees could barely be seen, as a lot of them had been cut down to facilitate farming.
The government also regulates domestic sewage to keep the river clean. All domestic waste from Guilin has to be diverted to the 4 sewage treatment plants in the city. And 30 heavily polluting industries built on the riverbank will have to relocate. Although black smoke billowing out of chimneys can seldom be seen in Guilin, it still exists in other parts of Guangxi. The sulfur emitted from the burning of coal causes acid rains and threatens to make 40% of the land in the province arid.
这是可以说也是一个教训，但这个教训来讲，对不对？有些确实也太轻重。
He says in the past, people thought that they could develop the economy first and treat pollution later. But now this mentality has to be changed, and both development and environmental protection should be seen as equally important.
Like most western provinces and regions, parts of Guangxi are heavily struck by poverty. But the irony is, the place where the late Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping started an uprising hasn't benefited and still remains poor.
Surrounded by mountains, the Baise area is virtually enclosed. Because of its isolation, the late Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping led the Red Army here 72 years ago to fight against the Kuomintang. In the hope of improving the livelihood, poor peasants here joined Deng in the fight. Today, the people here remain poor. 2 million farmers struggle to feed their families. Old Mr. Liu thinks he's better off than a few years ago, but in this harsh environment, most people still have to fight with plows. The central government built water storage containers to improve life here, but a water storage problem still exists. And with a shortage of lowland and fertile soil, farmland is scarce. Farmers can only grow maize in between rocks to earn a living.
In the central government's plan to develop Western China, residents are encouraged to move to places with a more hospitable environment. But many are reluctant to leave the land where their ancestors have lived for generations.
我们刚刚